What's up, do-it-yourselfers? Thanks for tuning in to Small Engine Repair Channel, where our main goal is to make sure you know that you have the ability to fix or repair whatever you want to take on. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Small Engine Repair Channel. Today we begin resurrection on this old Honda Trail CT90, a vintage Honda that hasn't ran in years. Oh, look at, we got another one back there. I wonder if it's gonna come out right around Christmas. But since this one's orange, I figured with the fall colors, it would be great for a little fall episode series. We'll save the other pretty looking one for Santa time. All right, we're gonna start with a leak down test, which verifies compression, or it tells us if the cylinder rings and valves are sealing properly. We're gonna do this basically before we chase any spark or fuel issues that this thing is probably guaranteed to have, just by looking at it, which we'll go over later. This gauge will give us a good, strong reading, which is always a promising sign in an older engine like this. And as shown here in just a second, we're gonna have some leak by in this thing, but I hook my hose up here. I make sure that my hose is tight in the cylinder head to make sure it's not leaking any there. We hook some air pressure up, and we're gonna see what it actually will have for leak by here. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna basically hand spin the engine over, and we are going to see if this thing's got any leak by or not. And you can see my gauge, or that needle, should be in the green right there, and it's way off. So with compression showing questionable, we are going to move on to valve clearance and just inspection. But keep in mind, this thing could have a compression release, but even due to its age, I want to verify the valve clearance and condition, and just to make sure everything kind of looks okay inside the engine. I've seen these things where guys don't know what kind of oil to run, and they basically will just go to sludge. And so I want to look inside this thing anyways. Even though the engine oil, I will admit I checked, and we're going to move on to that later, but it did look okay. So we're going to move on to valve inspection and valve clearance here. We're going to start by removing the valve caps, and like I said, with compression showing questionable, we're going to move on and set these things and set the valves to factory spec and clearance, or clearance, whichever you want to use, to make sure the top end is breathing right and is ready for ignition testing. Basically, if you don't have a solid bottom end, you aren't going to have a good top end. So, or you can have all the spark in the world, it's not going to run. I'm going to show you two ways on how to check valve clearance here. You can see I showed the intake valve there. The first way is to make sure the valve is compressed down. You can see where I just showed the intake valve was down. If you've ever looked at a camshaft before, and even if you haven't, that's okay. But the way it's designed, basically, if one valve is down, the other one has to be fully closed. If both valves are open, it's pretty easy to tell, but if you notice one valve is closed and the other one is open, basically, or compressed down with the rocker arm, you know the other one's fully closed. The other recommended way is to make sure the piston is at TDC, or top dead center, but basically I am wiggling the rocker arms with my fingertips, and I'm going to set these to actual proper spec here, which you can see I put the clearance in the screen there, but I've manually felt enough of these to where the exhaust was feeling questionable to me, and that's why I actually used a gauge. But not to brag, I've been doing this long enough, and I have felt enough rocker arms to where I don't necessarily have to use a feeler gauge anymore. So let's go ahead, and this one was in spec, it was just right there. Let's put these caps back on, and let's move on to electrical. As you can see here, we have some hokey wiring happening. We have wiring patched together, we have wiring in the battery box touching, and it's kind of hard to see, so I'll pan in here. But if you have any of these wires that are touching, or any old insulation, it's not going to allow spark to this spark plug. So it's worth testing every leading connection if you're not having spark, just to make sure. These 90s require a full battery in order to operate and to have proper spark, and so as you can see here, we're going to test this battery in a minute with a simple voltage meter. But after we unhooked all the finagling wiring that we had, this thing is not going to test very good at all. But as you can see, this thing does not have factory wiring whatsoever. This thing has been spliced over and over again with different connectors, which can definitely lead to spark issues. So we're going to make sure the tail light is hooked and not directly to the battery, how the guy who had it before us had it. So let's unhook that. And then let's look at our other wiring here, and let's hook the tail light to the proper spot, the brake foot switch, where it's supposed to go. Also, we won't leave this here later. Black Rifle Coffee, not paid by him, but boy, those things work really well. But yeah, we're gonna check the battery here. I know I mentioned it already. I have a simple voltage meter here. I'm just gonna hook positive to the red lead. I'm gonna hook black to the negative lead. And if this battery tests worth anything at all, it should show some voltage. And as you guys can see right about any second here, as soon as I get my clamps on here, boom. We test 0.1 volt in this battery. I hit the range even just to verify that this battery is shit or crap. Sorry for cussing, but either way, this battery's junk. So I did already order a new battery. I hooked it up to my meter just to verify it was good. As you guys can see, 6.5 volts. We are golden. I'm gonna pan here to see, or you guys can see how I got it hooked up just to verify. And then we are going to start putting this new battery in. So let's unhook the voltmeter just to get some wires out of the way. There's one thing I hate is a cluttered work area. So let's move on to battery installation. These things are a tight fit, and I didn't pan in here because it made for a real crappy angle here, but I fixed the wiring that was in there to make sure it wasn't touching the metal battery box or anything in there. But any 90 I've ever worked on, the wiring inside these boxes is very tight. You have to make sure it's all concealed and all the rubbers are over everything, just to make sure that you're not gonna pop a fuse. Basically, these things are a 6-volt system. There's 2 inline fuses, and if they touch metal at all, they will pop. So, and the way these batteries are held in, there's not a tie down or anything. It just kind of, it latches in the bottom of the frame, the holder here, and then the bolt holds the ground wire of the battery and also the battery holder itself, to where it's an all-in-one deal there. A lot of them have a plastic cover that goes over this as well. As a matter of fact, the red one that you guys saw in the background earlier does have all the factory plastics, and we will be going over that one in a future video. So if you're real into original or OEM pristine stuff, stay tuned for that one. But this part here isn't too extravagant, guys. We're just putting the battery in basically and making sure it's not going to come out. I'm going to tuck the wiring back in as much as possible. Fun fact about this bike, it is used as an elk hunting transport machine. Yeah, if you have questions on that, leave it in the comments. We can go on about it more. So we're going to tuck the wiring in here, and boom, let's verify that we have spark. And thanks for watching, guys. Stay tuned for next week. We're going to go through the complete fuel system and tire repair. Like I said, this thing's been sitting for a while. Have a great one, guys. Don't forget to like and subscribe.